We're losing weight, and I don't have a lot of weight to lose. You know those binders that you put baseball cards in? We put credit cards in them. At this point, I am $25,000 in credit card debt. Joe's tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt. So this is like make or break. We need the lifeline.
That entrepreneur in need of a lifeline? That's Brian Chesky, co-founder and CEO of Airbnb, a service that lets you rent a couch for the night, or a cabin, or a castle. Today, Airbnb is valued at $30 billion. 8 years ago, a very different picture.
We have this website, and maybe 50 people a day are visiting it, and we're probably getting like 10 to 20 bookings a day. So, and by the way, we've been working on it for a year and a half. So for anyone who's worried your company doesn't have traction, that was our traction.
It was 2008, an election year in the United States. Barack Obama was running against John McCain.
You needed a tax cut then.
Brian was at the Democratic National Convention hatching a PR campaign for Airbnb, one that could rescue the company and their credit card bills.
Joe and I looked at each other and we said, we're airbed and breakfast. The airbeds aren't going so well. Maybe breakfast will. As we thought, what if we could sell breakfast? Maybe we can make some money. What's a non-perishable breakfast? Cereal. And so we thought, the presidential campaign's coming up. We just launched the DNC. What if we created a Barack Obama themed breakfast cereal? And we thought, what would a Barack Obama themed breakfast cereal be called? Obama O's, like Cheerios, the breakfast of change. We thought, well, we want to be a nonpartisan website, so we'd also have to need a John McCain themed cereal.
And that's a no-brainer.
John McCain was a captain in the Navy, and so we came up with Captain McCain. It's like Captain Crunch, a maverick in every bite. We ended up making 1,000 boxes of collectible breakfast cereal. We sold them for $40 a box.
That's $40,000. Not bad for pocket change, and it got them through a cash crunch, but it came at a cost.
We had to physically make the breakfast cereal ourselves, meaning we get a printed poster board, and we had to fold it and hot glue it. No one told me I had to hot glue breakfast cereal. And they should call it burn glue, because every time you get on you burn you. And I had a perfect 1-to-1 ratio of burn to box. And so I literally had to hot glue 1,000 boxes of cereal. At one point in the middle of the night, I remember reading, I wonder if when Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook, he had to hot glue breakfast cereal. The answer was no, and this was not a good sign.
But what was a good sign was Brian's willingness to work with his hands, burns and all. I'd argue that painstaking, handcrafted labor is actually the foundation of his success. In order to scale, you have to do things that don't scale.
You got to have incredible talent at every position.
It's like this huge push.
There are fires burning when you're going home.
Can you believe it?
Such an idiot. And then you go back to, this is totally going to be amazing.
There are so many easy ways.
I'm supposed to know what to do. I have no idea what to do.
Sorry, we made a mistake.
But you have to time it right.
Oops.
Working at a 3-bedroom apartment.
Stuff that just seems absolutely nutballs 10 years later. I was like, well, that's just how you do it.
We haven't made
Just how you do it.
This is Masters of Scale. I'm Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, partner at Greylock, and your host. On this episode, I'll make the case that the only way an organization can truly scale is to first do things that don't scale at all. I'll try to prove that theory through stories from some of the smartest entrepreneurs I know. Over the last 20 years, I've worked on or invested in many companies that scaled to 100 million users or more. But here's the thing. You don't start with 100 million users. You start with a few. So stop thinking big and start thinking small. Hand serve your customers, win them over, one by one. Now this may sound like odd advice if you're an entrepreneur with global ambitions. Mark Zuckerberg didn't personally invite 1.8 billion people to Facebook. He built a great product and the users just poured in, right? Not exactly. On this show, I'll dispel that myth by talking to founders who fought to win their users. I'm starting with Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb, because he epitomizes the idea of handcrafting the user experience before you start to scale. It's a principle he first absorbed in design school.
I was doing medical design once. I designed a children's ventilator. I had to sit in the shoes of the child. And so I had to imagine being a child, get in the operating table, and you have to put yourself in the shoes of the patient or the person using your product. And if you're only doing A/B tests, you're never designing with empathy.
But a funny thing happened to Brian when he moved to Silicon Valley. He sort of forgot about designing with empathy for a single user. It's a common mistake amongst entrepreneurs with global ambitions. They have to promise investors the world. Tens of millions of customers, billions in revenue. It's intoxicating. Just listen to Brian go.
This is a travel industry that is something like 7% of global GDP, somewhere between 5 and $7 trillion, 10 times the market size of Google's market size.
And Brian might have stayed in the stratosphere, if not for a fateful meeting with Paul Graham, co-founder of Y Combinator.
Y Combinator is a startup incubator which cultivates and invests in early-stage companies.
Brian was admitted to Y Combinator in 2009, and his first meeting with Paul was confounding. Paul tends to stump people with deceptively simple questions.
And he asked us, where's your business? And I go, what do you mean? Like, where's your traction? I go, well, we don't have a lot of traction. He goes, well, people must be using it. I said, there's a few people in New York using it. And he said something I'll never forget. He said, so your users are in New York and you're still in Mountain View. I said, yeah. He said, what are you still doing here? And I go, what do you mean? He said, go to your users, get to know them, get your customers one by one. And I said, but that won't scale. If we're huge, we have millions of customers, we can't meet every customer. And he said, that's exactly why you should do it now. Because this is the only time you'll ever be small enough that you can meet all your customers, get to know them, and make something directly for them.
Brian and his co-founders followed his advice to the letter.
We literally commuted to New York from Mountain View. So we would be in Y Combinator for, was it Tuesday night dinners? And then Wednesday, Joe and I would go to New York. We literally would knock on the doors of all of our hosts. And we had their addresses. And we say, knock, knock, hello, hey, this is Brian, Joe, we're founders. We just want to meet you.
It's a little creepy just to knock on the door unannounced.
We needed excuses to get in their home.
So they came up with an offer that the host couldn't refuse.
We'd send a professional photographer to your home and photograph your home. Of course, we didn't have any money and we couldn't employ photographers. So Joe and I, we'd show up at their door and they're like, wow, this company's pretty small.
These home visits became Airbnb's secret weapon. It's how they learned what people loved.
It's really hard to get even 10 people to love anything, but it's not hard if you spend a ton of time with them. So if I want to make something amazing, I just spend time with you. And I'm like, well, what if I did this? What if I did this? What if I did this?
From those questions, a handcrafted experience is born.